My fiancée and her parents decided to publicly mock my late mother during our rehearsal dinner, so I ended the engagement right there in front of everyone. No hesitation. I'm 33 now, and until recently, I was engaged to Rachel, a woman I genuinely believed I'd grow old with. We met 8 years ago thanks to some mutual friends who introduced us at a backyard cookout. She had this incredible smile, a sharp wit, and from the first conversation, it just felt easy with her. When I popped the question 2 years ago, I didn't second-guess it. Everything about it, the timing, the relationship, felt right. But I wasn't just signing up to be with Rachel. I was also bringing her family into my life. Her parents, Thomas and Elaine, are the loud, spotlight-loving type. They have strong opinions on just about everything and aren't shy about sharing them. At first, I chalked it up to them just being outspoken, but over time, their sense of entitlement started showing up in all sorts of ways. Before I get into what actually happened, I need to tell you about my mom. Her name was Mary Ann, and she was easily the most incredible person I've ever known. She lost her battle with cancer 4 years ago after fighting it for 3 long, painful years. Watching her go through that and still manage to care for others was a powerful experience. She taught me what it truly meant to be kind, selfless, and brave. She wasn't just my support system, she was a lifeline for many people around her. My mom had this quiet strength where she'd help people without making a fuss about it. No guilt trips, no big announcements, just doing what needed to be done. And that included helping Rachel's family. Thomas and Elaine owe her more than they probably even admit to themselves. You wouldn't know it now, listening to how they talk about her. When I first brought Rachel around to meet my mom, things seemed fine. My mom liked her and even told me she thought Rachel was sweet. Rachel acted polite enough, but as time went on, the cracks began to show. There weren't any huge blow-ups, just little digs. Rachel would say things like my mom was too involved or that she tried too hard to be helpful. It rubbed me the wrong way, but I brushed it off, thinking maybe she just needed time to adjust to a different family dynamic. But the truth is, my mom went above and beyond for them. Back when Thomas and Elaine's restaurant was about to go under, my mom stepped in and co-signed a loan for them. Nobody else was willing to help, but she believed in them. She didn't stop there either. She helped get their finances in order and created a plan to turn the business around. And it actually worked. Their restaurant made it through the storm, and they kept their source of income because of her. Then, when their commercial oven broke down and they couldn't afford to replace it, my mom paid for a new one herself. She never asked for a dime back, even though she could have really used that money later for her cancer treatments. That was just her nature. And then there was Rachel's older brother, Brandon. He was at risk of dropping out of college because he couldn't afford his final semester. My mom quietly paid his tuition so he could finish school. She used to say that education was one thing no one could take from you. It wasn't just about money, she gave her time too. She spent hours helping with their bookkeeping and even babysat Brandon's kids so he could study in peace. And despite everything she did, not once did Thomas, Elaine, or Brandon express real gratitude. Sure, they'd toss out a quick thank you now and then, but it never felt sincere. My mom didn't mind, though. She wasn't in it for praise, she just genuinely wanted to help people. Losing her hit me hard. She meant the world to me, and when she passed, it felt like something inside me had been permanently torn away. Rachel was around during the worst of it, or at least she gave the appearance of being supportive. But now that I look back, I can see that most of what she did was the bare minimum. She'd say stuff like, "You have to move on," or "Your mom wouldn't want you stuck in sadness." Maybe those things were true, but they didn't feel comforting. They felt cold, like she just didn't want to deal with my grief. As the wedding day approached, more warning signs started to show up. Anytime I brought up my mom in relation to the ceremony, Rachel would act weirdly indifferent. I mentioned wanting to include a small tribute to my mom in our vows, and she brushed it off with, "Won't that just bring down the mood? Weddings are supposed to be joyful." I didn't push it because I didn't want another argument. But little things like that kept stacking up. Then came the passive-aggressive remarks from Thomas and Elaine. They had a way of making me feel like I wasn't good enough for their daughter. Thomas once laughed and said Rachel was upgrading her life by marrying someone like me. Elaine would throw out lines like, "Well, love requires sacrifice," like Rachel was settling for less by being with me. Those comments hurt, but I bit my tongue for Rachel's sake. Now, I wish I'd spoken up earlier. Maybe I could have saved myself from some of the pain. I kept convincing myself that things would improve after the wedding, once everyone calmed down. I couldn't have been more wrong. Then, about a month out from the big day, everything started falling apart. As I mentioned, Thomas and Elaine volunteered to host the rehearsal dinner at this upscale restaurant they were connected to. Initially, I took it as a peace offering, like maybe they were trying to smooth over all the awkwardness from the past few months. I even told myself maybe this was their way of rising to the occasion and finally acting with some grace. So, here's the deal with the rehearsal dinner. Rachel's parents didn't just offer to host it, they made it into this grand performance about how generous and thoughtful they were. Elaine couldn't stop dropping hints in every conversation, saying things like, "Oh, we've worked so hard to make this dinner unforgettable. People will be talking about it for weeks." And Thomas? He made sure to squeeze in, every chance he got, that the restaurant was top tier, one of the finest in the area. He made it sound like we should be grateful they managed to pull some strings to reserve it. The whole thing quickly started to feel more like a vanity project for them than any kind of meaningful gift. Still, I figured it wasn't worth the fight. I just wanted the wedding to go smoothly, so I let them handle the rehearsal dinner. Biggest mistake I could have made. As the day drew closer, Thomas and Elaine started letting their true selves out more and more. Every interaction turned into a parade of subtle digs and smug remarks. Take this one time, when I asked to go over the guest list, Elaine rolled her eyes and said, "Ethan, don't worry about the details, we've got it handled. Just show up and relax." It was such a small comment, but it really stuck with me. I mean, wasn't this supposed to be our event, mine and Rachel's? Shouldn't we at least have a say in who was invited? Then there was all this fuss Elaine made over the menu. She kept bragging about how they'd arranged a fancy culinary experience just for the occasion. "We got the chef to design something truly elegant," she said. "Nothing like what you get back home, Ethan." That phrase, back home, she used it all the time like it was some kind of insult. She loved reminding me that I came from a humble, working-class town, and they were a few rungs above me on the social ladder. I tried to shrug it off and focus on what really mattered. I kept telling myself, it's one evening. Just smile, nod, and make it through. But then Rachel started acting differently too. She'd always had this tendency to take her parents' side, but as the dinner got closer, it became more noticeable. Anytime I expressed a concern or suggested a change, she'd brush me off with, "Ethan, you're reading too much into this. My parents know what they're doing." But it wasn't just about the dinner. It was the growing feeling that I didn't belong in my own relationship. Rachel's family treated me like I should be thankful just to be included, like I was some charity case they were elevating. And Rachel? She never defended me. In fact, she'd often laugh it off or ignore me completely when I brought it up. Then, a week before the dinner, something happened that really should have opened my eyes. Rachel and I were over at her parents' house, going through some final wedding details. Elaine was in full control mode, flipping through seating charts and floral samples like she was planning a royal banquet. At one point, I suggested swapping out the centerpieces for something more modest, something that reminded me of my mom's style. Without even glancing up, Elaine muttered, "Well, Marianne had unique taste. But let's keep things modern. It is Rachel's big day, after all." I just froze. It was a subtle jab, but it cut deep. And Rachel? She didn't flinch. She just kept scrolling on her phone like nothing was said. I wanted so badly to call Elaine out on it, but I stayed quiet. I didn't want to stir up drama right before the wedding. I swallowed my pride and said nothing. Looking back, I regret that silence. All those little slights were piling up, and I kept convincing myself it was better to keep the peace. I didn't want to rock the boat. I thought if I just pushed through, things would calm down after the wedding. I couldn't have been more wrong. Then came the day of the rehearsal dinner. Right from the start, you could feel the tension hanging in the air. Rachel and I rode over to the restaurant together. I tried to lighten the mood with some small talk, but she was glued to her phone and barely replied. I asked her if she was excited and she just shrugged. "It's just a dinner, Ethan. Don't make a big deal out of it. Just a dinner, right?" When we arrived, Thomas and Elaine were already stationed like they owned the place. Thomas stood by the door, shaking hands with guests like some kind of VIP greeter. Elaine was barking orders at the staff, making sure everything was up to her standards. It didn't feel like a warm family gathering. It felt more like a corporate mixer. The place was over the top, crisp white linens, sparkling chandeliers, waitstaff and matching uniforms. Everything screamed, "Look at how fancy we are." I couldn't help but feel like I didn't belong there. As people started to arrive, I noticed something strange. The room was almost entirely filled with Rachel's relatives. I counted maybe 4 people from my side, my dad, my sister, and a couple of close friends. Everyone else was either a cousin of Rachel's or one of her parents' business contacts. They turned what should have been a shared celebration into a networking opportunity. I pulled Rachel aside and asked her what was going on. When I asked Rachel why hardly any of my relatives were there, she looked at me like I was being unreasonable and said, "Well, Ethan, your side of the family's pretty small. My parents had to fill the space somehow." She tossed it out like it was no big deal. No big deal. That phrase had become her go-to answer for everything. I pressed again. "Shouldn't more of my family be here?" She gave me this tired, irritated look and didn't even bother to answer properly. I bit my tongue and went back to mingling, but deep down, it felt off. This night wasn't really for us. It was just another opportunity for Thomas and Elaine to show off. What should have been a celebration of Rachel and me had somehow been hijacked and turned into their personal showcase. Then came the speeches, their favorite part of the evening. Thomas, naturally, was first. He practically leapt to the microphone like he was about to deliver a TED Talk, not a toast at his daughter's rehearsal dinner. He cleared his throat dramatically and began with, "Welcome, everyone. Tonight we're here to celebrate the joining of two families, our wonderful Rachel, and of course, Ethan." The way he said my name made it sound like he was choking on it. I sat there, trying to keep my cool, but every word out of his mouth felt like a jab dressed up in a smile. He went on and on about how proud he was of Rachel, how she'd always been the star of the show, how she knew what she wanted and always went after it. Then he threw in, "Now she's marrying someone who'll help keep her grounded," with this smug little grin. A few people actually laughed, and I was just sitting there, wondering if I'd imagined it. But no, he was absolutely serious. He moved into a story about Rachel being a high achiever from a young age, and how thankful they were for being able to guide her down the right path. And then came the kicker. He said, "We've always encouraged Rachel to aim high." And while Ethan might not have been exactly what we pictured, he stopped mid-sentence, leaving it hanging in the air like some kind of joke. I saw my dad and sister shift uncomfortably across the table. Then Elaine strutted up like she was accepting an award. Her speech started out innocent enough, gushing about Rachel, how thrilled she was for the wedding, but it didn't take long for the digs to start. She praised Rachel as the perfect daughter, the kind who deserved the very best in life. Then she added, "Good thing she's patient. She's already taught Ethan so much." I nearly choked on my drink. What exactly had Rachel taught me? How to stay quiet while her parents tore me down every chance they got? Elaine turned to me and, with this syrupy smile, said, "Oh, Ethan, we're just so thrilled to welcome you into the family. It'll be nice to have someone around who doesn't mind a little hard work, right?" Then she laughed, and a few of her relatives followed. I looked over at Rachel, hoping she'd look even a little uncomfortable, but she was laughing right along with them. Just when I thought they couldn't stoop any lower, Thomas took the mic again. He tapped his glass and said, "Before we wrap up, there's one more person I want to recognize, someone who's no longer with us, but who helped shape Ethan into the man he is today. His mother, Marianne." For a second, I thought, just maybe, he was going to be respectful. I was wrong. He said, "Marianne really was something else. Always had a knack for jumping into situations, didn't she? Always had strong opinions about how things ought to be done." He chuckled. Elaine chimed in from her seat. "Oh yes, she definitely wasn't shy about telling people what she thought. Remember how she always had to help, even when no one asked for it?" I sat there in disbelief. They were talking about my mom like she was some nosy neighbor who didn't know her place. But Thomas wasn't finished. He added, "To be fair, Marianne was very generous. She helped us quite a bit, maybe even more than we needed, to be honest." He winked like it was some inside joke. The whole room went uncomfortably quiet, but he just kept going. "We'll do our best to honor her memory at the wedding. Though let's hope Ethan doesn't inherit her habit of taking over. Don't want him stepping on too many toes, right?" That was the moment my blood boiled. My hands balled up into fists under the table, and I felt my face burning. I turned to Rachel, begging she'd speak up. Say something. Shut them down. But all she did was smile and say, "Oh, Dad, stop it," like it was all just playful teasing. Teasing? They were mocking my mother's memory in front of everyone, and that's all she had to say? What really got me was how pleased Thomas and Elaine looked with themselves, like they thought they were charming the room. But when I scanned the crowd, I saw it in people's faces: discomfort, embarrassment, secondhand shame. When Thomas finally sat back down, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. You could practically hear the forced clinking of silverware as people tried to act like everything was normal. Rachel leaned in and whispered, "Are you okay?" Her voice was calm, like she was asking if I wanted coffee, not if I'd just been humiliated in front of a crowd. I couldn't even look at her. I nodded stiffly, jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. Then Elaine walked over to our table. "Ethan," she said sweetly, "I hope we didn't offend you." Thomas and I just wanted to lighten the mood a little. It was all meant in fun. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I couldn't hold my tongue any longer. I shoved my chair back. It scraped loud across the floor, and I stood up. "Are you kidding me right now?" I said, my voice low but tight with rage. There I was, standing in the middle of the room, chair slightly tilted behind me, the entire restaurant dead silent, like someone had hit the mute button on reality. Everyone was staring, but I didn't care. My heart was pounding like a drum in my chest, and my face was on fire, but I knew I couldn't let this slide. Elaine and Thomas mocking my mother had already pushed me to the edge, but that fake little apology? That was it. That was the line. I looked right at Elaine. "Are you serious right now?" I repeated, sharper this time. She froze like a deer caught in headlights, probably stunned I actually stood up to her. Thomas lifted his head from his drink, eyes narrowing, like I just insulted royalty. Rachel leaned over and whispered, "Ethan, stop," like I was making a scene over nothing. I didn't even look at her. "No, let me get this straight," I said, raising my voice so everyone could hear me. "You spent the entire night taking cheap shots at my mom, the woman who bailed your family out when nobody else would, and now you're acting like it was just some kind of joke? And I'm supposed to laugh along with you?" Thomas leaned back with a smirk, arms crossed like he thought he was above it all. "Relax, Ethan," he said casually. "You're blowing this out of proportion." It was all lighthearted. Lighthearted. I repeated, practically spitting the word. "You called her a meddler. You made fun of how she gave and gave without ever asking for anything back. That's what you call fun." You could feel the discomfort thick in the air. Some of Rachel's cousins were suddenly fascinated with their forks, avoiding eye contact. My dad looked like he was 2 seconds from standing up himself. My sister had her arms locked across her chest, practically glaring a hole through Elaine. Elaine gave this forced little laugh, trying to play it off. "Oh, come on, Ethan. Don't take everything so seriously. We were just sharing memories. Everyone knows Marianne liked to be in charge." I shook my head in disbelief. "You mean how she helped you?" My voice rose. "How she saved your business when it was circling the drain. When she paid for your broken oven, remodeled your patio, and covered your son's final college tuition bill." I paused, glaring at them. "And this is how you repay her? Turning her into the punchline of your dinner party?" Thomas's expression shifted, less smug now, more irritated. He straightened up, trying to reassert control. "Okay, that's enough. We didn't mean anything by it. But if you're going to throw a fit, maybe you're not ready for the responsibilities that come with marriage." That one hit like a slap. It was clear he had zero respect for me, and even less for the woman who raised me. Finally, Rachel spoke up. She tugged on my sleeve and whispered, "Ethan, can we just step outside and talk?" I pulled my arm away. "No, Rachel. We're not going anywhere until your parents realize how out of line they've been." Elaine let out a dramatic sigh, like she was the one being wronged here. "Ethan, please, this is meant to be a joyful evening. You're making it uncomfortable for everyone." I stared at her, furious. "I'm making it uncomfortable?" My voice was shaking with anger. "You're the one who ruined this night the moment you decided it was okay to humiliate my mother in front of all these people. And you," I turned to Rachel, "you just sat there. You didn't say a damn word." Rachel's cheeks flushed bright red. "I didn't know they were going to say all that," she muttered, trying to defend herself. "But you laughed," I said, locking eyes with her. "You laughed at every single one of their insults. You didn't even try to stop it." By now, the murmurs had started up again. People were leaning across tables, whispering to each other about the train wreck they were witnessing unfold in real time. I could feel the weight of every stare in that room, but it didn't matter. I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing this for my mom. Then Thomas stood up, clearly fed up. "You know what, Ethan? If you're that upset, maybe you should leave." He pointed toward the exit like he was dismissing an employee. For a second, I considered it. I really did. Walking out, never looking back, seemed like the clean option. But then I looked at the few people who were really there for me, my dad, my sister, a handful of loyal friends. They were watching, waiting, and I knew I couldn't back down. Not this time. "No," I said, my voice firm and unwavering. "I'm not going anywhere. Not until you understand exactly what you've done tonight." Thomas opened his mouth like he was about to fire back, but I didn't give him the chance. "You act like my mother was some pushy woman who didn't know her place. But without her, you wouldn't even have this restaurant. You wouldn't have stayed afloat. She never did it for credit. She didn't want thanks. She did it because she actually cared. I took a breath, the room still frozen in silence. And now here you are mocking her memory like it's some kind of joke to you. That's not just disrespectful, it's disgusting. Even Thomas looked stunned for a second, like he couldn't figure out how to respond. Elaine's mouth opened like she had something to say, but nothing came out. Rachel just stared down at the table, her face twisted in a mix of embarrassment and irritation. Eventually, Thomas muttered, "That's not how we meant it." "That doesn't matter," I snapped. "What matters is how it came across. You don't get to rewrite the kind of person my mom was just because it's convenient for your version of the story. She deserved more respect than that, and honestly, so do I." I stepped back from the table and grabbed my coat off the back of my chair. "You want me gone?" I said. "Fine. But don't expect me to come walking back through that door." My dad stood up right away, ready to follow me out without a second thought. My sister grabbed her purse and gave Elaine one last icy glare before stepping beside us. A few of my friends hesitated, then quietly stood as well, clearly unsure of what to do but wanting to support me. From behind, Rachel called out, "Ethan, wait." But I didn't stop. I walked out of that place with my head up, even though my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my neck. Outside, my dad rested a hand on my shoulder and said quietly, "You did the right thing. Your mom would be proud." I nodded, but if I'm being honest, I didn't feel proud. I felt hurt. I felt betrayed. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized something important. If Rachel couldn't stand up for me, or for my mom, then maybe she wasn't the woman I thought I was marrying. A part of me was convinced that walking out was the right move, but another part of me couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough. If I left things where they stood, her family would twist the story to make it sound like I was just being emotional, or too sensitive, or dramatic. No, I wasn't going to give them that power. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my mom, her memory, and what I believed in. I took a deep breath and turned to my dad. "I need to go back in," I told him. "What?" my sister blurted, confused. "Why? You don't owe them anything." "I know," I replied, locking eyes with her. "But I'm not walking away without making things crystal clear. Rachel, her parents, everyone, they need to hear it. I'm not just leaving. I'm done. For good." My dad hesitated, then nodded slowly. "If that's what you need to do, we've got your back." But I shook my head. "This one's on me. I have to do it alone." My sister looked like she wanted to protest, but instead she stepped aside and gave me a nod of understanding. I turned around and headed back toward the restaurant, my stomach in knots but my mind laser-focused. I wasn't going in there to cause another fight. I was going in to close the door for good. People were whispering, casting glances at the door as I walked back in. Rachel was still at the table, looking pale, her eyes wide with confusion. She stood up when she saw me. "Ethan," she asked, "what are you doing?" I didn't answer her. I just walked past her, straight to the front of the room where Thomas and Elaine were still seated, looking a little too satisfied for people who had just ruined a dinner. Thomas raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised I had the nerve to return. Elaine gave me that fake sweet smile that made my skin crawl. "Back already?" Thomas said, sarcastic as ever. I didn't acknowledge him. Instead, I turned to face the entire room. "Excuse me, everyone," I said, my voice cutting through the low hum of conversation. The room went dead quiet. Even the staff froze where they were, watching from the edges. "I just need to say something," I continued, steadying my breath. My heart was pounding again, but this time I didn't flinch. I glanced at Rachel, who stood rooted by the table, hands wringing nervously in front of her. "I know this isn't how any of you expected tonight to go. But after what's happened, I'm not waiting until tomorrow. I'm calling it now. This wedding is off." The room exploded in gasps, murmurs, and the sound of chairs shifting. Some people turned toward Rachel, others whispered frantically. Rachel's jaw dropped, hands flying up to her mouth. "Ethan, no," she whispered. I held up a hand to stop her from saying more. The room went still again. "This isn't just about what was said tonight," I told everyone. "It's about the kind of people I'd be tying myself to. A family that disrespects me, disrespects my mother, and ignores the values I was raised to stand by. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life feeling like I don't belong." Thomas finally spoke again, condescension dripping from his voice. "You're making a huge mistake, kid. You're throwing away something good over nothing." I laughed, but it came out bitter. "Nothing? You call mocking my mom nothing? You think treating me like I'm beneath you is no big deal?" I shook my head. "No, Thomas. The mistake would be saying I do and chaining myself to people who clearly don't think I'm good enough. Elaine looked like she was either about to cry or scream, or maybe just embarrassed that their big moment had blown up in their faces. Ethan, she said, voice shaky now, maybe we shouldn't make any big decisions right now. Things got heated. Let's all sleep on it and talk tomorrow. No, I said, loud and clear. There was no tomorrow to talk about, no second chance waiting in the wings. This was done. Over. I turned toward Rachel one final time. Her face was streaked with tears, caught somewhere between breaking down and screaming. I turned and walked toward the exit, the sound of my steps echoing through a room full of stunned silence. Just as I reached the door, I heard her voice behind me, desperate and trembling. Ethan, please, don't do this. I paused, one hand on the handle. I turned my head slightly and said, I already did. Walking out of that place felt like tearing off a bandage that had been clinging for too long. Sure, it stung, but underneath the pain, there was relief. It was done. The wedding, the constant disrespect, the quiet humiliation of being treated like I didn't quite belong, it was all finally behind me. The next morning, the aftermath hit hard. I woke up to a phone exploding with notifications, over 100 unread messages waiting for me. Most were from Rachel. A handful came from Thomas and Elaine. A few were from her distant relatives I could barely place. The messages ranged from pleading to passive-aggressive to downright nasty. Rachel's texts were loaded with guilt. I'm sorry, Ethan. I never meant to hurt you. Please talk to me. Thomas, on the other hand, came in hot. You humiliated us in front of everyone. You'll regret this. And Elaine? She went full martyr. I can't believe you'd do this to Rachel. She didn't deserve that. I didn't respond to any of it. I didn't owe them my time, not anymore. But by mid-afternoon, Rachel showed up at my place. I figured she might. It was just a matter of when. I'd been mentally preparing myself all day, but when I saw her standing outside my door, it still hit like a gut punch. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were puffy and red, and her makeup from the night before was smudged and worn like she hadn't changed or slept. Ethan, she said quietly, her voice shaky. Can we talk? I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. What is there left to say, Rachel? I made everything clear last night. She winced like my words physically hurt, but she didn't back down. I know you're angry, she said. You should be. But we can fix this. We can work through it. I shook my head. That's the problem. You still don't get it. This isn't just something we can patch up and pretend never happened. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her dress, voice trembling. I was scared, okay? I didn't know how to react. Scared of what? I asked, my patience wearing thin. Scared of standing up to your parents? Of making a scene? Of choosing me over their approval? She didn't answer. Just stood there, crying, searching for the right words that never came. Then she took a small step closer, eyes wide and pleading. Please, Ethan, she whispered. We can fix this. I'll talk to my parents. I'll make them apologize. Just don't end things like this. I shook my head again. It's not just about them, Rachel. It's about you. Last night, you showed me exactly where you stand, and I can't unsee that. I deserve more than silence when I'm being torn apart in front of the people I care about. She stared at me, and I watched as the realization finally sunk in. Her face crumpled. A few weeks later, on a quiet Saturday afternoon, I was going through my mom's old keepsake box. It was something I'd held onto since she passed, one of the few physical pieces of her I still had. Inside were things like the silver earrings she always wore to church, her favorite pendant, and a small antique locket with my grandmother's picture inside. That locket had been passed down through generations, mother to daughter, and then finally to my mom. Before she died, she gave it to me and said, one day, you'll know who this belongs to. I hadn't touched it since. It stayed safely tucked away in that box. But that day, when I opened the box and started sorting through it, something fell off. The locket was gone. At first, I thought maybe I'd misplaced it. I searched every corner of the box, took everything out piece by piece. Then I checked the drawer it was stored in, the shelves, even the carpet around it. Nothing. A sinking feeling hit my gut. Someone had taken it. The only person who'd been in my apartment recently, besides family and a couple of trusted friends, was Rachel. My stomach dropped. A few days after everything blew up, she'd stopped by to return the engagement ring. Before she left, she'd asked if she could use the bathroom. I hadn't thought anything of it at the time. But now, it all added up. I picked up my phone and fired off a text. Did you take the locket from my mom's keepsake box? She responded a few minutes later. What are you talking about? Yeah, I didn't buy it for a second. You know exactly what I'm talking about. The locket my mom left me, it's gone. And you're the only one who's been in my apartment lately, I texted. I stared at the screen, waiting. She didn't reply right away, and I had this tight feeling in my chest, like I already knew what was coming. When she finally did respond, I felt my blood start to boil. I borrowed it, she wrote. I just wanted to have something of hers to feel closer to you. Borrowed. She took it without asking, without even mentioning it. She borrowed it like it was some random piece of jewelry, not a family heirloom. The nerve of it made me see red. I called her immediately. She picked up, sounding defensive right out of the gate. Ethan, it's not a big deal, she said. I was going to give it back. Not a big deal? I snapped. That locket has been in my family for generations. It's not some keepsake you can just swipe because you're feeling sentimental. She tried to soften her voice. I wanted to feel connected to you. I didn't think you'd even notice. Of course I'd notice. I shouted. It's my mom's. And the fact that you thought you didn't need to ask me makes it even worse. She started crying then, but I wasn't in a place to console her. Where is it? I demanded. It's at my parents' house, she said through sobs. I didn't want anything to happen to it, so I left it there. That did it. That was the final straw. You took something that wasn't yours, something that means more to me than you could ever possibly understand, and you stashed it at your parents' place like it was nothing? I'm sorry, she whispered. Sorry doesn't cut it, I said flatly. I'm coming to get it now. An hour later, I pulled up outside Thomas and Elaine's house, my jaw clenched the entire drive. I was furious, and by the time I knocked, I was ready to tear the place apart if I had to. Elaine opened the door. That fake sweet expression she always wore quickly faded when she saw me. Ethan, she said slowly. What brings you here? I'm here for my mom's locket, I said sharply. Rachel told me it's here. Her expression twisted into confusion, then mild irritation. Rachel took a locket? Why would she? Just get it, I cut in, not in the mood for her games. She narrowed her eyes but moved aside, letting me in without a word. A few minutes later, Rachel came down the stairs holding the locket in her hand. Her face was a mess, puffy, streaked with tears, but I didn't care anymore. All I saw was that locket, hanging between her fingers like it was nothing. Here, she said, holding it out with shaking hands. I snatched it from her without a word and looked it over, turning it in my palm to make sure it was the right one. It was. I stuffed it deep into my pocket. Ethan, wait, she said suddenly, voice cracking. Please, I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought maybe it would help me feel closer to her, to you. I looked at her, my voice like ice. You didn't help anything. You stole from me, Rachel. You took from my mom. After everything else, you went and crossed a line you can't come back from. Her face crumpled again, and fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. But I didn't stop. I turned and walked straight out the door and slammed it shut behind me. In the days that followed, I erased her from my life. I blocked her number, deleted every message, and cut off any way she could reach me. I was done. Done with her. Done with Thomas and Elaine. Done with all of the chaos they dragged into my life. Calling off the wedding had already been one of the hardest choices I'd ever made. But this was the final nail in the coffin. And as painful as it was, it felt like closure. I stood up for myself, for my mother, and for the values she taught me to never compromise. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt calm. I knew I'd made the right call. I had peace.